Let's talk about Tier 2 support. With Tier 2 support, you are providing supplemental interventions to, on average, about 5 to 15% of the students in your classroom. With Level 2 support, a student will still participate in their classroom social emotional learning lessons, but they can also receive more specified instruction within small social skills groups. A student receiving Tier 2 support can check in and check out with mentors. This can be done once a day or multiple times a day. At Tier 2, some students might benefit from the use of a daily behavior report card. More often than not, when I or one of the other 4 instructional coaches observes a student in a classroom, if that student does not have a daily behavior report card, a DBRC, then we're going to recommend it to their teacher. As a behavior instructional coach, we can actually go into Emergentree and create the DBRC for the teacher if necessary. So what is a DBRC, you might be asking? A DBRC is a well-documented intervention that can result in dramatic changes in behavior over time. It is a great tool for collecting data and allows us to analyze patterns in the student's behavior. It's also a tool that provides consistent feedback to a student regarding their behavior. This feedback is the actual agent of change for the student. Just like the supports we keep talking about, DBRCs actually are tiered as well. A student receiving Tier 2 support might have a DBRC, and their DBRC would appear kind of generic, a DBRC that could apply to multiple students. It's not specialized just for them. When the student if the student requires Tier 3 support, then their DBRC could be more individualized. But for Tier 2 level support, a DBRC looks kind of something like this. There's 3 goals, and they usually match up with school-wide expectations for the student to be safe, respectful, and responsible. Now, as you can see with this DBRC in front of us, that there are 5 different ratings that a student can receive throughout the day. And for every single activity that a student participates in, whether it's math or reading or stations or specials or even lunch, a student can earn a grade. And so for those grades, let's just review it real quick. If the goal is for the student to be safe and they receive a 5, well, what that looks like is the student is staying in their assigned area, they're keeping their hands and feet and objects to themselves, and they're walking with a purpose. Now, the 4 is going to be somewhere in between the 5 and the 3. And in this case, for the 3, what that looks like is the student's in the classroom, but they're not in their assigned area. Maybe they're pushing another student, or there's horseplay. There might be some loitering or running. Now, 2 is in between the 3 and the 1. And for the 1, you might see behaviors like the student leaves the classroom or building without permission or skips class. There might be physical aggression or confrontation. For respectful, let's just review what those look like as well. Those grades that you could receive. For 5, uses appropriate tone, volume, and language. The student also listens to others and talks in turn. For 3, they might make negative comments. They might raise their voice or yell. They might make disruptive noises, talk out of turn. And then for 1, for respectful, they might use profanity, make threats, or bully others, right? So with the DBRC, you're using it to check in with the student and to have a dialogue with them. When using a DBRC, it's important to be sure that you're providing the student with feedback between each block of time on that chart. The feedback should be related to the student's specific measurable goals that are being tracked. This will allow the student to more easily see the connection between their behavior and your expectations. The feedback session does not need to be long, but it should include 2 key components. First off, it should include an area of strength in the last block of time. Secondly, it should give the student a specific thing to work on to get their best score in the upcoming time block. I know it can be difficult to find this time to do this frequently throughout the day, but it can be the difference between this intervention being successful or unsuccessful. In order to do this with minimal disruption to instruction, you'll want a simple structured routine. A quick 1 to 2 minute routine for feedback after each block could look something like this. Ask the student to tell you one thing he or she felt they did well during that time. After the student shares, compliment him or her on the one thing you felt they did well. Next, pick one specific thing that he or she is going to work on improving or continuing to do well on during the next block of time. And finally, remind him or her what supplies they need to transition to the next activity and send them to begin. As behavior instructional coaches, we are here to model for you how to use the DBRC. We can help you create the DBRC. If you want to make specific goals for your students' DBRC, we can be there and we can meet online or in person to walk you through it. When a student appears to need Tier 2 support, it's time to organize a student support team meeting, or SST. If a teacher wants feedback on how to provide Tier 2 support to one of their students, they have administration fill out our behavior observation request form. The behavior instructional coach sits in on the teacher's class for a block of up to 2 hours. During this block of time, they are observing the students' interactions with their peers and with any teacher that works with them. When considering if a student requires Tier 2 support, it's important to begin collecting data. Behavior data helps us decide what supports and strategies may best help a student. If a student spends 90 minutes a day engaging in a behavior that interferes with their access to instruction, data should be collected to help determine why it is occurring and what interventions can be put into place to decrease the likelihood of that behavior. For example, data can be collected on the frequency of when a behavior occurs. This data can be collected using tally marks. Often, behavior coaches recommend collecting ABC data to determine the antecedent, which includes the events, actions, or circumstances that occur before behavior, the behavior, and the consequences, which is the action or response that follows the behavior. In classrooms with high amounts of activity, it can be extremely difficult to collect this type of data. Behavior coaches can provide support by sitting in on your classroom and collecting this data while you provide instruction and manage behaviors.